Welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast with your host, Chris Anderson. In this show, Chris and his guests will share their knowledge and experience on how to go from zero to successful entrepreneur. They have built their businesses from scratch and are now ready to give back to those who are just starting. Let's get ready to learn, grow, and elevate our businesses. And now, your host, Chris Anderson.
I don't know if you run a marathon or run long distance before at all. You're a runner and then you ran long distance before. And if you have, starting a podcast, starting a business and a new endeavor is a lot like that. So I've run multiple marathons. I've always been a distance runner. And there are some things that correlate really well. And so I'm going to try to use that as an imagery for you guys and understanding that we are in a marathon with our podcast, with our businesses, and it's not a sprint. And so there's different parts to running a marathon, starting a podcast that we need to think about. And the first thing is preparation. And preparation for a marathon looks different for different people. Some people have skill set, have the ability to train very little and go run a marathon. Some people need a whole lot of training because they're not ready for it. They're not used to it. They've not run distance for very long. And so with that being said, we're all at different places, starting our journeys, our podcasts, our businesses. And so don't compare yourself to the others out there. So when you go and run a marathon, basically you go and you all get kind of corralled into this area from the start line back. And there's different sections for levels of runners. But still, when you're in this group of people, you're looking around you, and I think it's natural for some people, the mind to start going, wow, they look like they're a really good runner, or they're going to completely own me in this run. It can get discouraging a little bit, or it can make you anxious or nervous. And so just like when we're starting our podcast, you're going to see people starting, hear people starting, you're going to hear about their wins, their accomplishments, where they're at along their journey. And you might then start to second guess what you're doing, or have that anxiety or worry come into your mind because they seem to be doing a lot better than you, or maybe they have had more practice than you. And so starting out, don't let those comparisons hurt you. Don't let those comparisons slow you down or stop you. So that's the first similarities is when you start, you start with a bunch of people, and it's easy to compare yourselves and get in the mental game and not do so well. The second is when you're starting out in a race, a really big, important part of running long distance is that coming out of the gate, when you start the race, you've got to pace yourself from the beginning. Because when you don't pace yourself and you end up going faster than what you should, you drain your energy a lot faster. You get tired a lot faster. Then you start having all the complications of that a lot faster. And so starting out, you need to find your pace, your rhythm that is comfortable for you. That makes it, you're a little uncomfortable, but you can sustain it for the race. And if not, there's a chance you might not make it to the end because of cramps, because of being hurt or whatever. Just like in the race of podcasting, you've got to find your pace. You got to find your rhythm within it. And that might be for you. Maybe you do only one episode every other week, whereas some people do one or two a week. That's okay. That's your pace. That's your rhythm right now. There's a lot that people have going on in their lives that make that their pace. And so that's okay. But find that pace before you end up getting burnt out, or before you overdo it and then you don't enjoy the podcasting anymore. So that's the second one. Find your pace, find your rhythm, whatever that looks like for you. And so, like example, talking to a client today, maybe seasons is something that fits for you. So you can have kind of that gap between seasons where you can take a breather. Maybe that's your pace. That's another way to pace yourself. And so make sure that you're finding that. Hey, Yoel, glad you jumped on here, man. So far we've got, don't judge yourself at the beginning of the race, the beginning of your marathon, and then pace yourself out of the gate. And then along these races, if you haven't ran a marathon, they have these aid stations. All right. They have areas where you can come on and you can get water. You can get some snacks. You can get Band-Aids if you need them. That's a whole nother story. Runners understand. But these stations are crucial on your journey, because when you're running a marathon, your body is physically deteriorating. It's being worn down. And so you need this rehydration, the sustenance from those snacks along these stations. And so utilizing those areas to then improve yourself, to sustain yourself going forward. And in our podcast journey, that could be the same thing. That could be being in a community where you get free information, you get encouragement, you get guidance that helps you kind of get to that next step, get to that next station, get to that next spot where you're going. That could be collaborating with other podcasters, becoming guests on each other's shows, networking in that way. Just that kind of boost you need to kind of get you to that next mile marker. And so really taking advantage of these stations, just like in a marathon. And then a big part of marathons, at least the ones I've run, just the environment that you're in, the crowds you run through, the cheers you hear during it, it is really just empowering. And so with that, we've got to remember to listen to those. Listen to people that's telling us it's a good job. Listen to the ones that say, hey, do this, do that to improve. But celebrating those wins along those races, being able to just in your mind, hey, I just made it 10 miles. I just made it 12 miles. Celebrate those wins, those little things like, hey, I'm still going. I'm still here. You've got to celebrate the small wins. You've got to see the positive things along the journey, along the marathon. And another part of the race, that those celebrating wins is a big part of it, but then also encouraging one another. I don't know, so many people during races, they'll either pass you or you pass them, or you might be stretching for a second and they run by you. So much encouragement comes from those people, just together, encouraging one another to keep going forward, to keep growing, to not stop when it's hard, when you're hurting, when you feel like giving up. And that's the same thing we've got with the podcast community out there. We've got to encourage one another, and we've got to accept the encouragement and support from one another as well. And then guys, when you're running this marathon, and a real marathon, they talk about the hitting the wall. And it's a true thing. Every marathon I've run, I've gotten to mile 16, 10 miles left. You hit this wall. And it's like, that's the breaking point. Like, you're going to give up or you're going to keep going. And in our marathon of podcasting, you're going to hit walls like that. Maybe more than one, where you feel like this is not worth it. This sucks. This hurts. This is painful. This is not giving me the result I want it to have. I'm not reaching enough people. I'm not having enough downloads. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that yet. And those walls aren't real. They're perceived, because we get in our minds. We let our feelings start controlling our thoughts. And so these walls, just like in marathons, you have to mentally break down and push through and just keep moving forward, because you're getting so close to the end. The work you've put in, the preparation, every step along the way in this marathon is getting you closer to that end result, that finish line. And just like in podcasting, you have goals along the way. And in the races, in marathons, you have certain goals, the 5K mark, the 10K mark, and so forth. And then eventually the end goal, the finish line. And so you meet each of these, and then it's mentally on to the next one. What can you do? One step at a time. Keep taking one step at a time. And then there it is. You turn the corner, there's a straightaway, and you can kind of see the finish line. You're getting more listeners. You're getting more downloads. You're getting more people reaching out, and you can see it start now. Hey, this is taking off. And that could be one new subscriber, guys. It doesn't have to be loads and loads of subscribers. It doesn't have to be loads and loads of dollars. Like, it's got to start somewhere. And in a marathon, when you come around that corner and you can see the finish line, guys, when you realize the work, the effort, the training has paid off. It's right there. You just got to finish this last little bit. I tell you what, every time, it doesn't matter how much I've trained, how little, how hard the race was, every time I've come around that corner and I've seen the finish line, tears start to well up. Emotions from just being physically overtired, but so emotionally grateful that I kept going, that I was able to get to that finish line and I didn't give up. This journey, this marathon of podcasting, guys, it's gonna knock you down sometimes. It's not gonna be the easiest thing. It's not gonna be all sunshine and rainbows constantly. It's gonna be a roller coaster until you get in that groove. But nothing worthwhile is easy. The greats, they didn't just succeed and become overnight successes. They put in the work and they took the hits on the chins. They got knocked down, but they got right back up. And we've got to remember that in these journeys. If it's a podcast, if it's a business, whatever it is, you've got to keep pushing and moving forward because that's the only way to get to the finish line. And so I just wanted to hop on here because I know a lot of people, and I was there when I started, wanted quick results, wanted it to be this greatest thing right from the get-go. But it takes time. It takes preparation. It takes taking each and every step when you don't feel like it, when you just want to give up. And so don't give up. Keep running your podcast marathon. Keep hitting those next goals. Keep taking in that free advice, that free guidance, that connections, that sustenance that's going to help you get propelled to the next level. Encourage one another, support one another along this journey. We're in it for the long haul. It's not a sprint. If you want it to turn into something, you've got to think long term. So I hope you took something from this. I hope it brought value to you.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. See you in the next episode.